presentations. So, as I told you, oral presentations, you take things, the files from Microsoft Teams. You have all the materials to prepare your presentation, and you have an ontology, like texts. I don't remember how I call it, but it's text for oral presentation or something. You find two ontologies of history of political thought with good materials for quotations for your presentation. So, do you have questions about oral presentation and so on? Somebody has doubts or things like this. If you have questions, it's better if you ask questions already in the class, so everybody who has doubt, we can discuss it together. Some other thing is, if somebody doesn't have yet presentations they want to present in the class, it's good. You can also offer new things. The last 2 weeks we're going to focus on the world history of political thought, post-colonial theories, and so on and so forth. So if you have, political ideas or theories from your countries, from your background, from your culture, more than welcome to offer it. So, questions about presentations? No questions. Okay. However, when you have ideas, you tell Alisa, and Alisa is going to put you in the calendar. Okay, let's get back to our class. So we have entered the third part of the course. This course has 4 parts. First part is Antiquity and Middle Ages. Second part is the theories of the social contract, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. And so we're going to have the midterm exam about this. Next week, Wednesday, second hour, we start the midterm exam. Monday, first hour, we finish the midterm exam, hopefully. Then we have the third part. We have entered in the third part. The third part is mature modernity. Mature modernity, we started with the Enlightenment. Enlightenment is the moment in which all the ideas of social contract, all the movement of modernity becomes reality. Enlightenment is a very powerful intellectual movement in which we have established the foundations of Western political civilization that are still nowadays present in our world. So, what are the main political principles of the Enlightenment? So, let's start with the general principles of the Enlightenment again. So, when I ask you at the exam, what are the main principles of Enlightenment? You must answer reason, science, individual rights, and progress. So, they say we have to use reason to understand reality. No religion, no superstition, no metaphysics, no tradition, reason. And scientific method. We understand reality through reason and scientific methods. We establish the individual, the person, as the crucial basis of our politics, our societies, our civilization, and we say we have this what the most important thing is the individual person. We have to respect the individual person. We already have to treat it as a means and not as an end and not as a means. So we cannot touch individual person. This is the limitation of the state. The state cannot enter your individual rights. And progress. Progress is the idea that the future can become better than the present. So we shift the focus of Middle Ages, of the past that was focused on traditions, on the Bible, on holy texts, and on the respect of the tradition, to the idea of progress, to the idea that the future can be better and that politics is aimed at making the future better than it is now. What does it mean in terms of politics? So, Enlightenment wanted to overcome the absolute monarchies, the absolute power of the monarchs. How they do that? First of all, through the separation of powers. As yesterday Alisa explains, explained regarding Montesquieu. Montesquieu, father of constitutionalism. We introduced constitutionalism as, we have to organize the state in a way in which there is the law, and the constitution is above all other powers. All the power have to respect the constitution, have to respect the law. This is called the rule of law. The rule of law means that even political authority, even the sovereign, even the president, even the king, even the prime minister, even the emperor, they have to respect the constitution, the law. So, the powers of the state are below the law. The law is above everything. Is the constitution, and constitution makes a separation of power to prevent absolute power. Then there are individual rights. Individual rights are the rights for everybody. Every citizen has rights. Every citizen has rights, and these rights are the limitation to the government. The government cannot interfere with individual rights. Individual rights are the limitation of the power. So, these rights, that Enlightenment was very much focused on rights. Western civilization is focused on rights, is obsessed with rights. Is obsessed with rights. Which kind of rights? We start with the distinction between human rights and legal rights. You remember this already was Locke who said that. Locke called it natural rights. Nowadays we call it human rights. What are human rights? Human rights is, we consider these rights just existing according to common sense and belonging to each person as a human being. So we believe that all human beings should be granted human rights. So these rights are related to the fact that you are a human being, okay? So if you're an animal, you don't have human rights. You don't have human rights for dogs and cats. But as far as you're human, as an animal, you're a human being, you have these rights. What are these rights that we think that should be granted everywhere, despite the state, despite to everything? The right to life. So, the state cannot kill you. The state cannot kill you. Civil rights. You cannot go to jail without a fair trial. You must have the human rights to defend yourself in front of a court. The political power cannot just bring you to jail without a process. Freedom of speech. You must be able to say what you think without fear of going to jail. The fear of self-preservation. So these are very important human rights. Freedom of religion. You must be able to believe in which God you want without fear of going to jail. Then you have the legal rights. The legal rights depend on the state where you live. The state where you live means where you are citizen. So you have the rights of the humans, which are for everybody, and we as Western civilization, we think these rights should be granted everywhere equally in the world, and that a state that does not respect human rights is not a legitimate state. Citizen rights. Citizen rights belongs to you because you are a citizen of a state. You are a citizen of a state. Citizen rights. Citizen rights means you are citizens of the state, so the state gives you a series of citizen rights. These citizen rights we will see in the next lesson, the third. 3 types. Civil rights. Civil rights. Everybody must be equal in front of the law, for example. Everybody must have equal rights in front of the law. Political rights. Everybody should have the right to vote for their representatives. And then we will see a third kind of rights, which are social rights, like education, healthcare, and so on. But this will come after, when we introduce socialism. So, these are the basis of Western civilization, these are the basis of the Enlightenment. We still live under these conditions. The United Nations have been promoted to promote and defend and protect human rights all over the world. So we try to establish the international organization to protect these individual rights who were first invented through the Enlightenment. Then we see that the Enlightenment has important consequences in history because it fosters two major political revolutions and one social revolution. Social revolution, let's say industrial revolution, but the two political revolutions, very important, are the American Revolution and the French Revolution. So yesterday we started talking about the American Revolution. The American Revolution. So, American Revolution, it's a process. It's a process. It started from 1777, and let's say it goes on until 1789. Then in 1789 we will have the French Revolution. 1776, American Revolution. So, American Revolution is a war of independence, is an independence war. Because when we start modernity starts with the so-called discovery of America, which actually is an act of colonization. The Europeans colonized the America, North America, the Americas in general, let's say. Europeans colonized all the American continent, took power over there, killed all the population that were living there, and established their own population there. As colonies. Specifically, the Britons took control of the United States of America. This is why the United States, they speak English. It was an English colony. It was an English colony under the control of the English kingdom, of the king of England. It was a colony built by sending there the most marginalized people, religious fanatics, people who wanted to escape jail, and people who wanted to make money. So they started, and they got very angry with taxation. So this is why still nowadays United States have very low taxes compared to Europe. When they say you pay 21% tax on added value, they say you're crazy, we would make a revolution immediately if you make us pay such high taxes. So they were paying taxes to the English kingdom, but they didn't have representation in the parliament as colonies. So they started this fight saying no taxation without representation. No taxation without representation. Started the War of Independence. The French supported this. France supported this War of Independence, and at the end they won. What does it mean that they won? They won because they wrote in July 14, 1776, they wrote the Declaration of Independence. They say, from this moment we are independent. As we saw yesterday, let's watch it again. This Declaration of Independence is pretty much taken from the ideas of Montesquieu, the ideas of John Locke, and as we will see later, the ideas of Cicero. They also took a lot from the ancient Rome. They liked a lot the books by Cicero on the Republic because they wanted to establish a republic. The United States of America is born as a republic. At the time, all over the world you only had monarchies, kingdoms. They started the first republic. They say we are a republic, and to develop that theory of the republic, they took again Cicero. They took the ideas from the Roman Republic, and they used it. So Cicero, the social contract, like John Locke theories, and the separation of power through Montesquieu. So let's go again through the Declaration of Independence, as we did yesterday, because it's very important that you remind.
The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
So here you see, they start saying, okay, at this point we think that the social contract has been violated, and we want to make a separation, and we will explain why we make this separation. Why we make this separation? Because we think that all men are created equal. All men are created equal. What makes them equal? What makes them equal is that they have equal rights. They have equal rights, and it's clear that they have certain unalienable rights, human rights, natural rights, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This they take straight away from Locke. You remember that Locke said, in the state of nature, human beings has natural rights to life, freedom, and property. They say life, liberty, and happiness, which is similar, and they say, the government, the scope of the government, the goal of the government must be only to protect these rights. So, they say, humans are more equal, they have natural, unalienable rights, and the goal of the government is to protect and secure these rights.
Are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
So again, we have John Locke, we have the foundations of liberalism. So they say, when you have these natural individual rights, the government must protect and respect these rights. When the government does not protect these rights, this means that it has violated the social contract between the people and the authority. And so there is another right. This is a collective right, the right to resistance, the right of the people to change the government and institute a new government in order to preserve their rights to safety, happiness, and so on.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states.
And so he starts to say what the king of the United Kingdoms did against them. And they make a huge list of things that the king did to violate the social contracts. Then what we have here in this part. So in this part we have the point that they want to demonstrate that this kingdom have evolved into despotism. into despotism. And here we have, you remember, Montesquieu, but we have all the ideas of the Republic. The Republic is the absence of domination. The Republic is something that completely refuses despotism. And so to refuse despotism, they explain why the King of Great Britain violated the social contract and why they want to get independent. So they get independent. At this point, they get independent. We have the Declaration of Independence, and they have this. They start to establish this new constitutional order, which is both based on Locke ideas and Republican ideas, aiming to protect individual rights against government excesses, while devising institution that makes this government formally effective. Sabrina, 30 minutes late. Yeah, we have to talk about your conference, but you're a bit late. We're gonna talk about it right now. So 1776, the Americans say, okay, we have our independence. They proclaimed independence, but they still need 10 more years to get into a proper republic, into a proper state, the United States of America. The United States of America. Why? Because they said, okay, we're independent, but what is independent? There were 13 colonies. Each of these colonies has their own government, their own rules. So how to make them together? How to make them together? There were conflicts, because they have different principles, they have different citizens, they have different things. So they were fighting these 13 colonies against one to another. So they take more than 10 years to get to this new important form of political organization, which is a federalist state. As you know, right now in the United States, like in Switzerland, you have a federalist organization. You have a federalist organization of society in which, for example, in the United States of America, you have 50 states, and these states have some prerogatives and some form of sovereignty, and then the central state, the federal state, has some other prerogatives. So they developed a federalist constitution. This took a lot of time. So let's go through history. So let's see. So we have Hamilton, we have Jefferson, and then they start discussing, but how can we make it? How can we make this together? There was a lot of conflict. They could not find a solution to put the 13 colonies all together. So we have these guys who start writing papers on constitutionalism, how to develop a constitution that would put together the 13 states, the 13 colonies, by respecting their differences, their autonomies. And so we have Charla, who's going to present us the Federalist Papers. Come here, Charla, please. So these were, a series of 85 essays that say, okay, let's start to build a new constitution. Let's start to build a new constitution. So, let's say the Federalist Paper are the basis upon which the Constitution of the United States have been built. It doesn't work. So, what can we do? It doesn't work because they have to say. What is that? Okay, so what do we learn from this thing that is happening every day that we cannot make presentation? We learned that before the class, Alisa, we were gonna put the presentation here, okay, every day. So when you have a presentation, you will put it on this computer because otherwise it doesn't work. So it's not that, it's not that you wait for me to say, okay, now is your presentation, and you say, okay, you wake up slowly, you come here slowly. No, must be, a little bit more ready. So the presentations we do that you put on this computer, or either you try if your computer works, or we arrive here. Sabrina, you want to send me the... Yeah, send it to me. So, okay, whilst we're fixing this technical problem, we're gonna discuss about democracy and about so, okay, let's take a pause until we fix this Federalist paper thing. So, what the point is, we had a discussion about democracy. And so Sabrina offered to organize a conference. We can do it. The last class was supposed to do debate was supposed to be a debate in the class. Instead of doing a debate, we organize a conference for all the students of the course of political science and international relations, and also other international students in the University of Messina. Okay, so we do a debate. Yeah, we do a debate. This debate, we start maybe at 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock, let's see in the morning, and we discuss the topics that we wanted to have. So this is gonna be the last day. The last day is on Wednesday, 9 of April. Okay, this is gonna be the last class, but it's also gonna be a conference. For this conference, we are going to ask for crediting. How do you say crediting? Credits. We're gonna ask for credits. I don't remember how to do, but should be easy. So we give also credit for this, and Sabrina is in charge of organizing it. The other interns, please help her. Other people, if you want to participate in the organization of this conference, you talk to Sabrina. Next week, maybe we're gonna have a meeting all together to discuss the topic. So we're gonna, since we have a debate here on whether democracy is good or bad, and whether political institutions should respond to the traditions and to the cultural institution, to the cultural roots of the different countries, we try to set up a debate on this matter. We're gonna have like 3-4 hours in the morning, 3-4 hours in the afternoon, and the main actors should be you, international students, bringing your own ideas from your own background. This is very important initiative because here in the University of Messina we have a growing population of international students, but we must also make them active actor in this university. You must take the control of this university because you're many people and you must claim power into this university. So today I'm going to ask the director of the department, Morelli, to introduce the conference. I'm going to say something, and maybe we're going to have a couple of other professors, but most of the thing must be you. So you start thinking what you want to talk about. It's not that you have to prepare a presentation, but you have to prepare a statement on your ideas on this topic and on what you want to discuss. So let's start thinking about brainstorming. Sabrina is going to build a tentative program, then we discuss the program all together and we try to make it better. So last class is going to be debate, but this debate is going to be organized in a sort of workshop more than conference, maybe. So this is the last day. Okay, so we're going to discuss about this point. We're going to develop it with Sabrina. Are you able to come not 30 to 40 minutes late at the class? If no, you have in your blood. It was a bus problem. So you're able to come on time. Okay, so we're gonna develop this and we're gonna discuss a couple of points with you later. So we have Federalist paper. Great. So please, guys, we try to fix this problem before we start the class. Now we need my cable. Yeah, but I need an adapter, which I have, no? But which I can.
was from 1787 to like 1788. Okay, so what is Federalist Papers? It's like a collection of 85 essays written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay between 1787 and 1788. These essays were originally published in New York to persuade the people to support the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. So at the time, the new independent United States was struggling under the weak Articles of Confederation. Okay, and it had like several weaknesses. For example, the federal government had no power to tax, meaning it could not raise money to pay debt or fund national defense. There was no executive branch to enforce laws or coordinate national policies. Congress lacked power to regulate interstate commerce, leading to trade disputes between states. These weaknesses led to economic instability, disputes between states, and a lack of national unity. So, how the Federalist Papers defended the Constitution? Basically, Alexander Hamilton wrote 51 essays, and mostly about like powerful central government. James Madison, 29 essays about like factions, and John Jay, he wrote only like 5 essays about national unity and national defense. But first, like about like starting with quotations, I wanna like just put their pictures and like for you to see who they are. The first one is Alexander Hamilton, second one, James Madison, and John Jay. And one of their biggest arguments was like checks and balances. Like we talk about this since like the beginning of our course. And it's basically like the checks and balances in the government, different branches in the government. And I want to give the example of like a soccer team. For example, there's like the goalkeeper and there's like the defense and like whatever. And like these checks and balances in the government help everyone coordinate accordingly and just like work, function better. So who were they? Alexander Hamilton was the first Secretary of the Treasury in the United States history and the founder of the United States financial system. He was also one of the country's founding leaders and a founder and a theorist of the Federalist Party, the first party of the United States. James Madison was the 4th President of the United States, a political philosopher, statesman, and one of the founding fathers of the United States. He served as Secretary of State from 1801 to 1809 and as President from 1809 to 1817. John Jay was American statesman, jurist, and diplomat who was one of the founding fathers of the United States. He signed the 1783 Treaty of Paris on behalf of the United States. Jay was the first Chief of Justice of the United States, starting from 1789 to 1795. So now that we get to know these people, obviously I have some quotations. Okay. On the need for strong governments. This is number 23, and Hamilton wrote it. The necessity of a constitution, at least equally energetic with one proposed to the preservation of the Union, is a point, at this time, no longer be controverted. So here Hamilton argues that the new government must have real power to enforce laws and protect national unity, unlike the weak system under the Articles of Confederation. This is a quote from Madison. It's Federalist number 51 on checks and balances. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls of government would be necessary. So here Madison acknowledges human nature, and people are not perfect. So government needs a system of checks and balances to prevent corruption and abuse of power. This is why the Constitution divides power among 3 branches. And the last one, on the importance of unity, which is number 2 from Jay. Nothing is more certain than the indispensable necessity of government, and it is equally undeniable that whenever and however it is instituted, the people must cede to it some of their natural rights in order to lessen requisite powers. And here Jay argues that a strong unified government is necessary for national security and order, even if it means individuals must give some freedoms for their private will. This idea remains relevant today in debates over national security versus individual rights. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about his legacy and modern relevance. So these articles were written like more than 20, 30 years ago, and it's still relevant.
you, Chava. Very good presentation, some technical problems. So next time from tomorrow, let's try to have it either here or you check your computer before starting. So we go smoother. Okay? So the Constitution of the United States of America, it's the same from 1787. Still nowadays they have the same Constitution. But they do, you know, what they do? They do amendments. They cannot change the Constitution, but they can do amendment, you know. The amendment came after years, especially after the Civil War. You remember that then the United States in the 19th century, at the end of the 19th century, they're going to have a civil war, you know, between the North states and the North states and the Southern states, which was mostly about slavery, because the Southern states made a huge use of slaves deported from Africa to the United States of America. They still, you know, the African American population came from these huge deportations of slaves from Africa. They will have this civil war mostly about slavery. So what is the Constitution? We're gonna see it even more right now, studying the French Revolution. But what is a Constitution? A Constitution, if we look at it, what does it say, the Constitution? You know, Section 1, for example. Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States of America, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Established in 1787 is still like this. So the first point they say, what is the legislative power? You saw a constitution defines the power of the states and their prerogatives, how this power is organized. So you say the legislative powers is granted to a Congress, and the Congress is divided between the House of Representatives and the Senate. In most countries we still have, you know, the legislative power is into a parliament, and the parliament is divided between the Senate and the House of Representatives, or Chamber of Deputies, and so on. So they say which are the conditions to be elected in this legislative power. How does it work? The Senate, and they say, you know, from the senators, from 2 senators from each state. So usually the Senate is more focused on the territories and so on. Who is the vice president? What are the prerogatives of the vice president? So the Constitution says how. First of all, says what are the powers of the states and how they work and how they relate to each other. And they really, in this Constitution, they really tried to put into laws the principles of Montesquieu about separation of power and check and balances, how these powers control each other. And they started this very important form of government, which is the federalist form of government. So they say the state sovereignty must not be too strong, and we also must have local levels of government. This is something which is still very much debated, because some people say, you know, a federalist state is more able to preserve democracy through local levels of government, but it doesn't always work this way. So in the United States, they try to divide, you know, powers, but there is always, for example, conflict about taxation, where if the state of the federal level has more power to enforce taxation. So we have several, you know, efforts to establish federalist forms of government all over the world. For sure, in the United States of America, you have a federal state which somehow works. For sure, in all federal states, you put in the central level, in the federal level, you know, the foreign policies, the powers which concern the money, so printing money, the central bank, the army, national defense, and so on. And so for the other levels, they try to establish, you know, different level of things. Another country which has a long tradition of federalist organization is, for example, who knows another country? Germany, or more, even more. Switzerland. Yeah. So Switzerland, they have a very strong level of federalist. They organized into cantons. These cantons have very high powers, and they try to set up also a kind of direct democracy, because at the canton level they have very small cantons, and they do referendum to make the most important decisions. So they exercise referendum in Switzerland as form of direct democracy within a federalist country which is organized in small states. Then, federalism looks like a great idea, but so many other countries want to be federalist and try to organize a federalist system to different level. Yeah, as you say, Germany, for example, Germany is a federal country, even though it's not that the central government still has much more power compared to the local levels. What are other federalist countries in the world? Russia. So how does it work, federalism in Russia?
That all regions have some kind of independence, but formally. But after all, we know in Russia all power in hands of one person. But basically, we have also local, not constitutions, but local laws, local rules. But they're not that different like in US when they have totally different policies. Basically, everything is kind of the same, but we have local governments.
Yeah. Why is Russia a federalist country?
Because it's really huge.
What?
Because it's really huge.
Yeah.
It's impossible to control it.
Why it's really huge?
Historically.
Why? Historically, what happened?
You just gain a lot of lands
Yeah.
and keep holding down.
Because I was Russia. Before. What was the government of the form of government in Russia for centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries?
Before it was empire also.
It was an empire, big empire. So usually empires have great states, as Montesquieu said. No, usually have great spaces, but they tended to concentrate the power in the hands of one sovereign power. So when you have big territories, you tend to say, yeah, maybe we make it federalist so that we can govern this huge territory through different levels. And then, what happened after the empire in Russia?
Soviet Union.
Yeah, which was, what was the name?
Republic.
What was the name of the Soviet Union?
Socialist Republic.
Exactly.
I know it in Russian.
SSSR.
United Socialist State. United Socialistic State Republic.
Unione delle Repubbliche Socialiste Sovietiche, Unions of the Soviet Socialist Republics. So the communists wanted also to make a kind of federalist situation in which you say we have different republics because they recognize that the people living in different territories, they have different, we're kind of different nations, like the Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, the Ukrainians, and so on. And they say so it's a union of republics, but then the power was very much centralized. So formally is a federalist state, but it doesn't work like a federalist state. So federalism is usually considered a very good idea, but not very much implemented. But the Americans, started this, and this actually works. Then, so we have this. Like also, if you think of the United Kingdom, it's different nation, much more complex system. Then we have another nation which is the other way around. So we have federalist countries and so on, but then we have a nation that in the history of humanity is the very idea of a centralized state, of a centralized republic, of a centralized idea of their own nation. What is this state? Which is very much centered on the center political power. What is this state? Very much focused on their own.
US?
No, US is federalist, we say it. So one which is very much united. They really recognize themselves as a union, as a proper nation, as a republic. It's very, very much centralized tradition. No. China, it's different story. France, la République française. The French Republic is considered, very much united, indivisible. They really have this idea that when you get French citizenship, you become part of a nation which is very much centralized. Indeed, 1 out of 5 French people live in the city capital. You have all the power centralized in Paris. Paris, is the soul of the French Republic. They think that the French Republic, that the French nation is not a unification of different things. It's a kind of soul, it's a kind of spirit. It's something that you believe completely in this. Why they think this? Because they did the French Revolution. So, still nowadays, in Europe, we as Italians, for example, we don't like the French very much because we say that they think that they're the best in the world. And actually, they think they're the best in the world because they did the French Revolution, because they brought, freedom and liberty to all humanity. Because the point is that the Americans did a revolution and established the First Republic. Why? Because they didn't want to pay taxes. The French made the revolution. Why? Because they wanted to make humanity free. So it's a different thing. They really think they're better people. Somehow they're right, because the French Revolution was a huge thing that completely changed the history of humanity. So I have a few videos, not sure if I'm gonna show you, because the point is that when we say did you do modern history exam? Yes. Did you go through the French Revolution?
Yes.
Yes. So you already know the history. We're gonna think about the idea. Don't say the history we all know. So the history is French society was divided because we were in a time in which theories of social contract, enlightenment, and so on. They say all men are born equal. Actually, in Europe, society was divided between different people, between the aristocrats and the normal people. So this small part of aristocrats, they were supposed to be born aristocrat and by nature being different, because they have two different explanations of aristocracy. Either it was by the will of God, in which the leader of all aristocrats was the monarch, the most important monarch, by the will of God. So he doesn't have red blood, he has blue blood, he has different blood, he's noble, he's aristocrat. Either because, someone said because it was a choice of God, because it was God's will of having the king and all the aristocrats. Some of them were even chosen by the king. You have the aristocracy. What is the aristocracy? You have the principe, duca, marchese, and so on and so forth. Il feudatario, il valvassore, il valvassino, il valvassallo, blah 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 blah. So you have this caste, this class chosen by God, and then you have also another class which was a very privileged class, which was, so you have the aristocrats and you have, what was the other privileged class before the French Revolution? What has privileges? The clergy. So you have the aristocrats and the clergy. They were they didn't have the same rights. They were not equal. They had privileges. They said, since you're born aristocrats, you have more privileges. So these guys were the 10% of the population, but they have their own castles. They have their own different rights. They were much more powerful, and so forth and so on. Right now, you can tell me, yeah, but in the United States of America, you have the same, because the 10% more richer population has, controls everything. But this is different, because in the United States, everybody can become rich. It's a point. In ancient French, in the system previous of the French Revolution, either you were born aristocrat or third estate. No way you can change your status. So the third estate could, you know, could not have the same right. If they violate the law, they have different courts judging the aristocrats and judging the third estate. You have different a different system of rights, different systems of law, and so on. So the clergy has his own representatives, his own laws, his own judges and tribunals. The aristocrats, they have their own rights, judges and tribunal, and the third estate has their own rights and blah 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 and tribunal. So they have a kind of assembly, like a parliament. In the parliament you have one part representing the aristocrats, one part representing the clergy, and one part representing the third estates, and they voted. But the votes of the aristocrats and of the clergy was valued more than the third estate. It was not just one person one means one. No, it was different according to your significance, your political significance. You say the aristocrats are more politically significant. So one of these explanations is this is for the will of God, who decided who is the monarch, and from the monarch you have all the aristocracy. Other people say that differently. So, said also, we have the right to be the aristocrats. Why? Because we are the descendant of the German barbaric population which then 500 years ago invaded France to control, and by fighting to the conquest, through they conquest, and they produce the submission of the other population. So we are aristocrats because we came here, we conquered, and we were more powerful. We were more powerful, and we established our domination, and so we have these rights. So it doesn't matter what was the explanation, but the state was divided in these classes, and there was no way, it was a matter of where you were born, either aristocrat or third state. This doesn't exist anymore in the world, but this was the situation. We have some Indian students here. No, India. Yeah, India. So India, I was curious, what about the caste system? Do you have a division of the population based on the caste system or not?
Yes, the majority religion in India is Hindu, and it has 4 major caste divisions and subcastes to it, and it is very prevalent. You can
Yeah, how does it work?
First of all, the highest caste does not engage with the lowest caste at all.
Yeah, that cannot.
No, they cannot even sit in the same place.
In the same place, they
No.
cannot sit.
The lowest caste is called the untouchables.
The untouchable.
Yeah.
The Brahmin.
No, that is the highest
That's
caste.
sorry, that's
Yeah.
the highest. And the elite.
The lowest caste is called the Shudras.
Shudras.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so do they have different rights and they can do different things in society? How does it work? It's politically important for having different kind
Not
of
really.
rights.
Not really. They do not have any representation whatsoever.
No representation.
No.
Okay. So let's say we still have something similar in India, like the caste system. You imagine that Europe is all based on a similar kind of caste system, of caste system. You had different, it was not social classes, because social classes you can move from one class to another. No, it was checking. It was, castes in which you had the aristocrat, the clergy, and the third estate. And the king was ruling as an absolute monarch. But the king was the leader of the aristocracy, was the most important among the aristocrats. So all over Europe, society was divided in this way. Aristocrats, and the aristocrats, they have castles, they were landlords mostly, no? They have the property of huge lands, and they control these lands, and the peasants who were cultivating these lands, they have to pay taxes to the aristocrats, and so on and so forth. And then you have the third estate. Who was part of the third estate? All those who were not born aristocrats. So you have the workers, the artisans, the peasants, and so on. But you also have the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie. Who was the bourgeoisie? Bourgeoisie were people who were not aristocrats, but they were very much committed to trade, to exchange. And so you remember that, in the Middle Ages, these people started to rebuild, small towns, city republics, and so on. Why? Because they wanted to commerce, they wanted to exchange the goods, and so on. So they even established, the first banks, and so on. So over the centuries and the centuries, among the third estates, this class, bourgeoisie, came up and started to have a lot of money. A lot of money, even much more money than the aristocrats. But still, they didn't have the same privilege and the same rights than the aristocrats. Bourgeoisie. So, bourgeoisie is this class growing up and started to make money. They will become the capitalists in the centuries. They started, to do commerce, to develop technique, to start manufacturing, production, and so on. So they had a lot of money in themselves, but they didn't have the same rights. This was the organization of the society, and they had to pay a lot of taxes. Let's say that this also was also relevant in the French, but the French are very elegant. They would never say we made a revolution because we didn't want to pay taxes, but still, it was important. So we had this situation. So there was a lot of public debt, and there was war against England. So the king said, I need more money to do war against England. So let's reunite that what was at the time the parliament, les États généraux. Okay, so said, okay, all the representative of the clergy, the third estate and of the aristocracy, we meet all together and we decide how to fund the war. Like nowadays, they want to fund, has to pay new taxes for funding rearm Europe. So they gather and they say, let's see how we can pay taxes also because we have big economic crisis. So May 5, 1789, say, okay, let's meet all together. The representatives of the third estates, of the clergy, and of the aristocracy. Let's meet all together. So, the third estate was not very happy with this. They say, look, guys, let's be honest. We produce the 90% of the wealth of this nation. We pay 90% of the taxes. We don't even have the same vote in the assembly. And also, we don't even have the same rights than the others. This does not work. We want to say, we have an assembly, each person is one vote. So, since we are more, we want more votes than the others. So, at the end, the king say, okay, let me think about it, we're gonna discuss it with the other guys and blah, 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 blah. So, what they did, the third estate started to discuss the thing in Paris and blah, 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 and they took the Bastille. They made this revolution by taking the Bastille. Okay, and so it started the revolution. It started the revolution in this way. So let's see a couple of movies on this, a couple of videos. So which one can we start?
A political and social system known as the Ancien Regime, in which the power was concentrated with the wealthy and privileged. The people were divided into three estates: the clergy, the nobility, and everyone else. The first two estates made up about 3% of the population and had huge tax exemptions, with the third estate paying most of the taxes which had been increased due to their support of the American Revolution. The Age of Enlightenment caused many people to question the king's right to rule, the church's influence in politics, and the entire nature of the hierarchical structure of French society. Attempting to solve the country's financial crisis, the king gathered the Estates Generale, the King's Advisory Board, which hadn't met since 1614, which consisted of representatives from all three estates. Disagreements, however, caused the Third Estate to leave and form their own government, declaring themselves the National Assembly, and vowed to not give up until France had a constitution. Shortly afterwards, the king dismissed his financial minister Jacques Necker, which caused riots in Paris, and 3 days later, the storming of the Bastille. In August of 1789, feudalism was abolished and the Assembly adopted the Declaration of Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The king, beginning to fear for his life, attempted to flee the country, but was discovered and captured. This outraged the people, and a petition drive to depose the king was organised, but things got out of hand and 50 people were shot dead as the revolutionaries began to split into various factions.
Okay, this is after the revolution. So right now you have an idea, more or less, about what happened. Okay, let's see also this.
At the end of the 18th century, the most glorious kingdom in Europe would face a mighty foe, the power of its own people. One man would rise to inspire the nation to cast aside a reluctant king and a hated queen. And a new republic would be born in blood, the blood of the French Revolution. (1794), the Conciergerie prison in Paris. An impenetrable fortress on the banks of the Seine. Dank, rat-infested, it is known as Death's antechamber. Inside, what was once the voice of the nation is about to be silenced. As his hair is shorn and his neck laid bare for the blade of the guillotine, Maximilien Robespierre is about to be fed to a monster of his own creation. The French Revolution has reached its pinnacle of violence.
French Revolution is this extraordinary moment when people began to believe that you could actually recreate almost everything in a society, that you could not only change the politics, the institutions, but you could change human nature itself through political action.
The French Revolution really does constitute the crossroads of the modern world where everything begins to turn in a different direction.
The revolution saw a feudal land turn its back on aristocratic tradition and chart a violent new course towards the future. It would shake the very foundations of Europe, and its impact would be felt across the world.
The French Revolution is the most important event in Western history. There are developments that can rival, like the Industrial Revolution, like capitalism, but if you mean an event, I can't think of anything more important.
It was the revolution that upset things the most. I mean, again, when you consider that it got rid of the Catholic Church, it got rid of Christianity, it got rid of the nobility, it got rid of the king, it got rid of all these things.
The French Revolution would bring bread to the poor, democracy to France, and would establish a whole new order of society. But progress would come at a price.
It was really a moment of extraordinary hope, extraordinary ambition, and then it turned into this most horrific tragedy.
Now,
Yeah, the most horrific tragedy. Yeah, I mean, it didn't go so smooth. Like the American Revolution was easier. You know, they wanted the thing, they blah blah blah, and they made it. They did there was some problem in making a constitution, but you know, the French Revolution was most ambitious. They wanted to change the nature of society. They wanted to say we can establish a new kind of human civilization. So it was pretty much difficult in the things. So when we come to the exam and I ask you the French Revolution, I don't wanna listen the history. You know, we know it was the Third Estate, they revolt against the king, they killed the king, and so on. And afterwards there was a lot of turmoil, the terror, and so on. I want to hear the ideas. What are the ideas? The ideas is that they really they changed the history of Europe, the course of the history of Europe. You know, already the very word revolution. Revolution meant in Middle Ages it meant revolvere, meant returning to the initial point. It meant that the circular cycle of time had get back to the beginning. With the French Revolution, it becomes something totally new. So it becomes the fact that you change something looking at the future. So with the French Revolution, we have a new idea in which the politics is about the future. It's not anymore about the past, but it's about the future. It's based on this Enlightenment idea of progress. It's the idea that through politics we can make a progress, which can change the society in better. It becomes the idea that future is the center of politics. Then, if the American Revolution is based on the idea of John Locke, as we have seen, the French Revolution is based on the idea of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. As I told you, Rousseau, you know, when they made the revolution, they went to Geneva, they took the ashes of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and they brought it to the Pantheon and they put it to the Pantheon, the founding father of the French Republic. So, what was the central idea in Jean-Jacques Rousseau theory? General will, la volonté générale. So we have, during the revolution, they constantly try to understand, to interpret, and to put in practice the general will of the people. The popular sovereignty, la souveraineté populaire, they really try to put it in practice. And the most, you know, there was a political party who wanted to do this more than any others, the Jacobins, led by Robespierre, Maximilien Robespierre, which really wanted to establish a new era for humanity, which really wanted to radically change politics. We really wanted to make something completely new. So what happened is that, you know, they wanted to radically change everything, and so they started to say, yeah, the general will of the population is to abolish aristocracy, and they abolished aristocracy. Then they said the general will of the people is to get rid of monarchy. So that the general will of the people, you know that for Rousseau, when there is the general will, when there is the democratic decision, you have to comply with this. So they say the people doesn't want the monarchy anymore. So they took the monarch, they took the king, and they cut his head. Then they say the people doesn't like La Regina, Maria Antonietta, and they took it and they cut the king. So they started to use this guillotine. This guillotine was the idea that you change history and you make everything equal by cutting the head of those who disagree. So this was, you remember that for when I explained Rousseau, I say the idea of democracy is a very strong democracy. It's like Hobbes, but putting the power to the people. So they felt, you know, that when they could understand the general will, la volonté générale, the will of the people, they were authorized to do whatever, you know. And so this was the reign of the terror. Means that for 2 years, you know, all the aristocrats escaped from France. Those who remained were killed by cutting their head, and also, you know, the point of going on of this revolution, they killed those who were opposing the revolution, until the moment that they even decided to cut the head of Maximilien Robespierre, as you saw in the movie. So this is the thing. So as you see, there is a difference between liberalism, who say, yeah, there is a limitation for government, for politics that does not have to enter into your life, and democracy, who say we have to promote equality, we have to make equality real, and so we need a strong political power to promote equality. We really is not our focus to say, you know, the limitations of the government. We want the government to actively act to realize equality. So we're gonna focus on the ideas of the French Revolution, not on the history, but on the ideas. And for this, we're gonna consider the work by the architect of the French Revolution. The architect of the French Revolution was a guy who started thinking. He was a member of the clergy, actually. He was not a member of the third estate. He was a member of the clergy, but he really felt for the third estate. He really thought, the third estate, you know, it's my state and it's enslaved and I want to make it free. It's moment for change. So what did he do? He wrote this short pamphlet, What is the Third Estate? He published in January 1789, and then actually the Third Estate did exactly what was written in this book, started from January, and so they arrived, they did exactly what Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès said, and they made the French Revolution. The French Revolution, with the symbolic date, is 14th of July 1789, when they took the Bastille. The Bastille was the prison, was the jail, you know, in which they say these people are unjustly detained by the monarch. They enter the prison, they make the prisoners free, and they put fire on the prison. So they did exactly what Sieyès said. What did they do after the French Revolution, after taking the Bastille? They established a republic, and the first act was, we abolish aristocracy. There is not any more aristocracy. And they drafted the first Declaration of the Rights of the Citizen and of the Man, which is the foundation, you know, of modern ideas of rights, because rights are what makes human equal in front of the law, in front of the state. So we're going to go through this book. And we're going to introduce a few concepts that are very important for your exam of history of political thought and in general for your studies of political science and international relations. We're going to introduce the concept of nation. It's very important. We haven't talked about the concept of nation yet. The concept of rights, equal rights, again the concept of citizenship, and the concept of constituent power. Okay? These are very, very important concepts. So, okay, I'm going to introduce this concept today, and then we're going to also have a presentation on this book, right? Who's going to present the book? It's you, Lynn. Lynn, you want to do it today or Monday? Or tomorrow? Tomorrow. Okay. You feel better today or still sick? Still sick. Word. So, okay. So hopefully tomorrow you'll be better.
I have a presentation about continental history.
Yes. You want to do it today or tomorrow? Tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow we start with two presentations. When I arrive, presentation already in the computer and ready to be, yes? Or you're on your computer but it's right, okay? So, the concepts we want to go through, there are four concepts, crucial, fundamental. When I ask you about for the French Revolution, I want to hear these four concepts. Nation, equal rights, citizenship, constitution, and constituent power. Okay, let's go through this. The concept of nation is very important because nowadays we have a lot of nationalism all over the world. It didn't exist because it was not that important before the French Revolution. He started with Sieyès. So he said, he introduced this concept to create a relationship between the state and society. So he started to say, what is the third estate? What is the third estate is the title of the book. What is the third estate? The third estate is a nation. What is a nation? A nation is a collective body of people, is a body of individuals who share the same rights, live under the same laws, and have the same representatives. What is a nation? Again, a nation is, a body of people who have the same rights, live obey to the same laws, and have the same representatives. So what was this for? This was to say, okay, so aristocracy is not part of the nation because they have their own rights, which are privileged, because when rights are not equal, they become privileged. They have their own representatives and they have their own laws. So they're not part of the French nation. They are not part of the same nation. So, kind of they made a separation. They said, okay, we have the General Assembly, but the representatives of the third estate are a nation. So they split it. They went away. They were in the same room with the other representatives, with the king, to discuss the increase of taxation. And they said, okay, bye-bye, we go on the other room because we're a nation. We want to make our own laws and live under the same rights and the same representatives. If you, aristocrats, want to be part of the nation, you have to accept the same rights, you have to respect the same laws, and you have to have the same representative in which one person is worth one vote. Okay, so this is the concept of nation. The concept of nation then will subsequently evolve within, a more ethnic, traditional, and cultural meaning, but it was born like this. It's political. It's a collective body of people who share the same rights, live under the same laws, and has the same representatives. So, this is the nation. The nation is this body of people who has these rights, live under the same laws and the same representatives. What is the name of the individual member of this collective body? The citizen. The citizen. So who is the citizen? Is the individual body of this, is the individual member of this body of people, and is characterized by having the same rights. All citizens have the same rights. So it says we have the same rights as third estate. The aristocrats, they have privileges. So they're not citizens. Either they give up on their privileges, they're not citizen members of our nation. So they took, they started their own private assembly. They did what CES said. So we have to do our own assembly. We are a nation by ourselves. So, again, the point is the concept of rights. To be a citizen means that you have a number of rights. A number of rights, to be a right, must be the same for everybody. It's a right if it belongs equally to everybody. If it's different, it's not a right, it's a privilege. It's a privilege. Privileges are just for one part of the population, rights are equal for everybody. So they argued the aristocracy is a different nation because they have the privilege and the exemption that the third estate do not have. This privilege, they were inherited by blood. So aristocrats enjoyed legal and judicial privileges different from the common people. They had their own courts, their own legal system. They didn't have, the same duties as the third estates and so on. So, revolutionary wanted to create a society in which everybody was equal in their rights. So, the concept of citizenship. So, citizenship, it's being member of a nation. Is being member of a nation. And means enjoying a set of common rights, or common equal rights in their state. So right now we can think, we already saw citizenship in ancient Greece as a crucial concept, but citizenship in ancient Greece or Europe was different from citizenship how it's redefined by the French Revolution, because citizenship means membership into a nation, and this membership gives you a set of rights and duties. These rights and duties must be the same for all. So citizenship is a membership that gives you access to equal rights and duties. These rights, the French Revolution was focused on two kinds of rights: civil rights and political rights. So we can think of citizenship as a bundle of rights, as a set of rights, which are mostly focusing on political rights and civil rights. What is civil rights? What are civil rights? The most important civil rights is to be equal in front of the law. So that when you have a trial, when you break the law, when you have some, judiciary thing, we're all equal in front of the law. The fact that law apply equally to everyone regardless of their origins or social status, thus eliminating the privileges enjoyed by the aristocracy. So we have at this point in the history, we have this civil rights equal for all. That means, the third estate in front of a judge, and in general they obey to the same laws and they have the same legislation. This made them equal. If we think, but it was just the starting point of the civil rights movement, because we still had, like, for example, in the 20th century, very big civil rights movement. Does it come to your mind some example of important civil rights movements?
Revolution, Russian Revolution.
That was not about civil rights. That was about, let's say, social rights, if you want. Social rights, because well, we will see that communism is about social rights. So another civil movement right. Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King. What did he do, Martin Luther King? Exactly. So there was racial discrimination. So the Afro-American descendant didn't have the same rights, the same laws as the white people, as the other people. So there was, racial discrimination. The Negroes were not allowed to do the same things as the white people. You remember that they were not allowed even to sit in the bus in some places close. They were not allowed to go to the same schools. They were not allowed to get access to the same services. Civil rights. Nowadays, what is one important civil rights movement? Very important in Europe and in the United States that everybody is very much obsessed with.
Feminism.
Yeah. Or its evolution, contemporary evolution. Feminism is a very good example. So they say, we as women actually don't enjoy the same rights. So there was a civil rights movement for making women vote.
Suffragette.
What?
Suffragette.
Say again?
Suffragette.
Suffragette. Well, exactly. Suffragette movement to make the women vote and so on. So, and right now, nowadays, what is the civil rights movement working on this thing? That they say we are discriminated, we want to have the same rights. Yes, who say that? LGBTQ. So they say, we as gay people, we don't have the civil right to marriage and we fight for our rights because we feel discriminated. So we don't feel that we have the same rights in front of the court because we don't have the right to get married as the other and so on. Civil rights. Civil rights. Political rights. What is political rights? Easy. What?
Right to participate in politics.
How?
Vote
Vote?
and vote for.
Yeah. Being voting and being voted and being elected, run for election. So we see these two, political rights, civil rights. Then when we see the advent of socialism as a political ideology, we will see a third kind of rights, social rights. But for now, we stick with these two, political and civil rights. So citizenship is a bundle of rights. And these rights, for the French Revolution, they focused very much on political rights and civil rights. Tomorrow we're gonna have 3 presentations on this topic. Thank you for your attention. See you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Next